but you have to have a scheduling philosophy. I've heard so many different consultants over the years talk about so many different ways of scheduling. The way we schedule, and I'll challenge you to go back and listen to the episode that we did on scheduling itself, but scheduling has to be intentional. Scheduling is an intentional activity, and it's going to affect your productivity.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Bruce B. Baird, and you're listening to the Productive Dentist Podcast. In this podcast, I will give you everything that I've learned over the last 40 years in dentistry, working with thousands of dentists. I'll tell you, it's not that my way is the only way. It's just one that has worked extremely well for me, and I'd love to share that with you, so you too can enjoy the choices and lifestyle that productivity allows. More time for things you love, increased pay, better team relationships, and lowered stress. Let's get into it with this week's episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast.
Hi, this is Dr. Bruce Baird with the Productive Dentist Podcast, and this is episode 97. We're closing in on 100 episodes here over the next few weeks, and I'm going to share with you guys some ideas over some questions that have been sent to us, and looking at those questions, kind of what are my thoughts on it. And this is something that we get a lot, and it's my schedule is jam-packed, and I'm booking patients out 2 to 3 months. How can I simplify my schedule so that it is not so willy-nilly? That was their actual quote that the doc shared. Well, this is a loaded question. It's a huge question. On the last podcast, we talked about leadership and having clarity in our vision. Those are all great, but you have to have a scheduling philosophy. When I first started in practice, I told you guys could go back and listen to early on, but I spent an enormous amount of time frustrated about my schedule. We were seeing massive numbers of new patients. I didn't know where to put them. A buccal pit was the next available appointment. Whatever we did in our scheduling, it was always the next available. Well, we're booked for 3 weeks now, or 3 months. Our next available for XYZ is in June, and it's May, or it's April. Well, what's going to happen to you in that kind of an environment is, number one, you're losing a massive amount of productivity. If you're booking people 3 months out, you're losing a massive amount of productivity. So how do we deal with that? And I've heard so many different consultants over the years talk about so many different ways of scheduling. The way we schedule, and I'll challenge you to go back and listen to the episode that we did on scheduling itself, but scheduling has to be intentional. Scheduling is an intentional activity. So I had a dentist, and it's going to affect your productivity. With that question, we're booking patients out 2 to 3 months. I go back to a story about a very, very well-known dentist that came through Productive Dentist Academy, and most of you know who it is. I'm not going to go into names, but he told me, he said, Bruce, I'd love to do this, and this is a September seminar that we were doing. He said, I'd love to do your scheduling stuff, but I'm already booked into January, so there's no way that I can increase my production per hour because I'm already booked till January. I said, really? You're booked till January? That's amazing to me, because I will tell you, my entire career, I was never booked more than a week and a half, 2 weeks out, that I couldn't see somebody if I needed to. I couldn't see an emergency. I couldn't see a big case. I've always, once I learned how to schedule properly, I was never scheduled out that far. And so I said, there's no way. I don't know anybody that's scheduled out 4 months or 5 months, can't see anybody else. And he said, well, I'll show you. I said, okay, well, let's print your schedule. So we printed his schedule I looked at it first. And then we printed up some blank schedule pages. And I looked at his schedule, and sure enough, the dude was booked all the way into January. And I was just shaking my head. I can't believe this. And I said, so if you have somebody new comes in, you can't see them till mid-January? He goes, yeah, I can't see them. I was like, okay. Well, let's look first at productivity per hour. And he was producing around the national average at that time, about $375 an hour. So $375 an hour, that's what he was doing. Well, what I did is I took that sheet, blank sheet, and I said, let's take this patient and move them here. And I looked at a Tuesday and I said, let's move this patient to Monday here. And let's look at this here. And so we just began moving patients around until our productivity now was at over 1,000 an hour. And I did that for 3 consecutive days, taking people that were already in the schedule and putting them in a new schedule. And so he had gone from $375 an hour to over 1,000 an hour. And his comment was, and he's a good friend of mine, but he said, you can't just move people around like that. I said, yeah, you can. It's your business. This is your life. This is your business. What's happened is the cart is way out in front of the horse here. You know, you need to have an intentional activity of how you want these people to be scheduled. And so I've heard people call rock, paper, scissors. They do all their big cases in the morning. They do their all their consults in the afternoons. You know what? Whatever you want to do is fine. But I like being productive the whole time I'm at the office. That's my deal. I like to be productive. I don't want to be really productive one day and suck the next day, because you can't make up for a bad day. You can only just make a bad day average. So I like to intentionally position patients in larger visits, larger appointments. So in case a patient, and many times when I see somebody booked out 3 months, they're doing the occlusal on 30, but not doing the MOL on 14 and 15. So I put all of that treatment together. I want to have longer visits. I want to have, when I sit down, I want to do more dentistry. And many times that dentistry is booked against other dentistry that I'm doing that I know is not going to take me as long. We call that productivity per hour. How do we book it? It's based on cost or based on price, not based on time. So it's productivity based on, on the productivity, not on how long it takes me to do something. So what ends up happening many times in scheduling that gets people behind, they run behind at lunch, they run behind at the end of the day, they just run behind, is because their schedule is set up with the X's and slashes, meaning it's doctor time, assistant time, doctor time, assistant time. Dentrix calls it perfect day scheduling. Well, I can tell you Dentrix has no clue how to schedule productively. Neither does any other software out there. What I can tell you is how do you schedule productively is you look at how much are you treatment planning and how long are you scheduling for different procedures. I don't mind. I'm going to use the example. If I have a goal of 1,000 an hour, what is that? That's 8,000 a day. So if I have, let's say I'm placing 4 implants and that's $8,000. Literally, I know I have booked that day at 1,000 an hour. So I will put 1 chair with those 4 implants, and theoretically, when I first started, which I did do, I would book that chair for 8 hours. Now, I know that 4 implants isn't going to take you 8 hours. And people would say, Bruce, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. I understand that. But what was your goal? I always tell people I only have 2 goals. One is to reach my goal, and the other is to take great care of my patients. If I'm running behind and my schedule's full and I got 2 to 3 months in between times, how do I simplify my schedule? I may treatment plan a little differently because I'm wanting to do more comprehensive dentistry, but more importantly, the way that I schedule is going to become differently. I can easily look at your schedule, spend 45 minutes to an hour, and show you exactly how to schedule 1,000 an hour. Or I can show you why you'll never be able to do 1,000 an hour the way your diagnosis and treatment planning. So, but somebody who's booked out 3 to 6 months or 3 to 4 months or 2 to 3 months, I can guarantee you I can look at that schedule and I can get you producing double what you're producing now, with an understanding that I'm going to also need to train your team, to train your treatment coordinators, to train your front office, all to have the philosophy of scheduling to productivity, not to time. And so when I look at that 8-hour day, putting in 4 implants, how long does it take me to put in 4 implants? Well, it just depends. But let's say I'm laying flaps and maybe doing some grafting and some other things and put 4 implants in, maybe a couple hours. And I'll have people say, well, Bruce, did you schedule that the rest of the day? I mean, did you just go home when you finished? No. I knew, and my team knew, that it was only going to take me 2 hours to do this procedure. So they began to put in, they're not going to put anything next to the time that I'm placing the implants and doing the grafting, but all of the crap stuff that I have to do, the buccal pits, the occlusals, just the little unproductive procedures that dentists do, that we all do, that's all put in the rest of that day. Why? Because I know I've reached my goal at 8,000, for the day, 1,000 an hour. And 1,000 an hour, if you're working the average 128 hours a month, which is 4 days a week, you're now producing $128,000 a month. You're a $1.4 million producer. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Now, we'll have a whole nother conversation about PPO and all of that. We've had plenty of those podcasts, but the opportunity for you and your team to put people not in an emergency type situation, when you have this, when you have a patient that comes in that wants to get their 3 fillings done, you're going to put them strategically in a space like we just talked about, where it may take you, if I'm prepping, let's say I'm prepping veneers in the anterior. How long does it take me to prep veneers? Let's say it's $8,000 to $10,000 case. I prep the veneers. I get them done. My team scans. My team does everything else. And we do these same day smiles. But even if I was provisionalizing the case, I've trained my team to provisionalize. So, and I'll bond them or put them in for those provisionals. But my total time involved in those types of procedures that I call highly leveraged procedures usually doesn't take me that long. How long does it take to cut a 3-unit bridge or a 4-unit bridge or four units of crown and bridge or 5 onlays in one quad or 4 onlays in one quad? How long? It really comes down to how do your diagnosis and treatment planning, if you're doing that comprehensively, and then how it's being scheduled from there. So I hope that makes sense, because when do I run through lunch? When would I ever run through lunch? Well, I only run through lunch if I have somebody to work on and I'm behind my goal, or possibly an emergency patient. I'll take care of them. But most of the time that's writing a script or, maybe doing a pulpotomy or pulpectomy on a hot tooth so I can get that patient out of pain. Usually, though, that's just giving them some antibiotics. So in looking at how to do this properly, I think that's probably the strongest thing that we teach at Productive Dentist Academy is this is how you schedule effectively. If you're doing that scheduling with the slashes and the X's, who one of my good friends is the one who developed that years ago, it's really non-productive. Because what happens is you have your X's. I can't be in more than one place at one time, and you're griping at your team because the way they schedule it. Well, those days are gone. Those days are gone when you schedule based on productivity. And because the other way, as soon as you clip a pulp horn or the decay goes deeper than you thought, and now you're doing endo as well as doing the crown. Now what you're doing is you're running behind. And let's say you have 2 or 3 chairs that you use. Now you're running behind, so you have 2 people waiting in the waiting room. You also have your hygiene waiting for checks. That just continues to increase stress. And what I can promise you is there's no reason to practice that way. None. Zero. And we can show you exactly how to schedule it properly, how to communicate with patients, how to have great financial arrangements so they can do more dentistry, not less. But what you really want to get away from, is where you book people out 2 or 3 months and it's a bunch of little crappy little procedures. Now, if you love doing crappy little procedures, then keep doing it. If you like being frustrated by your schedule and having it jam-packed and having patients complain, well, just keep doing what you're doing. But what I can promise you is what we teach will change your life. And the sooner you do it, it doesn't matter if you're 55 or you're 25. I just know that somebody 25 is going to reap the benefits of that for the next 40 years, and that's going to mean millions of additional dollars that you're going to be producing. So anyway, I hope this has been a good podcast. Great questions, and I'm gonna answer some more questions on the next podcast.
If you're losing sleep over your business and feel like you're already overloaded, but know your business needs attention, you just don't know how, when, or where to start, you're not alone. The reality is many dentists are overworking themselves, yet their practices are still struggling to be as productive as they should be. This is not sustainable, and there is a better way. That's why PDA has developed a transformative new program, Business Impact Foundations, to get you above the daily chaos and propel your business into an investment-grade practice. Using easy-to-implement proven methods combined with a unique learning atmosphere, you can activate a strategic growth plan in just 60 days. If you want to clarify your vision, align your team, and elevate the health of your community like never before, call us right now at 1-800-757-6077, extension 8, or head over to productivedentist.com/foundations to secure your spot. We have 2 sessions left this year, and each program is limited to only 20 doctors. Just for our listeners, use the code 2021IMPACT, that's 2021IMPACT, all one word, for $700 off your tuition.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe. Pass it along to a friend. Give us a like on iTunes and Spotify, or drop me an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. Don't forget to check out other podcasts from the Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentistpodcast.com. Join me again next week for another episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast.